Hi, welcome to Mystic Seaport Museum. I'm Chris Gasiorek. I'm the Vice President of Watercraft here, and today I'm going to take you on a little walkthrough of what we call our Watercraft Hall. And as you can see, I'm standing next to a green door, and as we walk in, if anyone remembers the scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark where they take the Ark into the warehouse and just see miles and miles of boxes and boats. This is pretty much that with boats. So we're going to walk in and we're going to see first engines and then boats. I'm going to tell some stories about some of what we have here. So as you first come in, you're going to see it's a warehouse and it's got engines and it's got boats. So what do we have in here? We have our permanent watercraft collection and marine engine collection. The museum received its first vessel donation for collection in 1929. That's actually a larger boat that's not in here but is still in the collection. In this room we have about 300 marine engines, a lot of them from the watercraft that you'll see, and about 470, kind of goes up and down a little bit every day, historic watercraft vessels. Mostly American, mostly wood, but also materials including fiberglass, canvas, aluminum, tin, birch bark, walrus skin, seal skin, pretty much anything you can imagine, we've got it. So let's walk in and we'll tell some stories. On the engine side, you'll see a lot of our engines, and each of them has a story as well. We have gasoline, diesel, steam, semi-diesel, and naphtha engines. The ones you see kind of on the far rack, those are mostly taken from our watercraft. We take the engines out of the long-term storage vessels so that the weight of the engine doesn't change the shape of the hull when they're in storage, so we can preserve the artifact. And as we walk into our boat hall, we do have one gray vessel. Our collection is mostly recreational and working vessels, but right here you see a lifeboat from the Wayne Victory, which was a World War II victory ship manned by merchant mariners carrying cargo in World War II. We have added some fiberglass vessels to our collection. We've put some interesting ones here. A recent addition to our collection, I've been saying we recently added 1 2/2 Boston whalers. On the left here is a 1957 Boston whaler, one of the first year of production of the Montauk design. And on the right you'll see, not in great shape, this is a 1961 Boston whaler that was used in an iconic magazine ad in Life magazine where Boston whaler cut one of their vessels in half. Kind of became iconic in both the advertising world as well as the boat world, and really made things take off for Boston whaler and made them into the company and respected company they are today. But you might wonder, after you cut a vessel in half for an ad, what do you do with it afterwards? You can't really splice it back together. The answer for Boston whaler is they threw it in the woods, and it sat in the woods for, I guess, about 59 years. And we were recently able to acquire it and pull it out of the woods, but it does look like it's been in the woods for quite a few years, and we're cleaned it up a bit, and we're going to see what we do with that as far as presenting it for the collection. Hopefully we've got some sailors out there, some laser sailors. So one of my favorite vessels in our collection is this laser class sailboat that was the production prototype built by Bruce Kirby. So this is actually laser number 0. Lasers today are raced single-handed in the Olympics. They're up to hull number, I think 180-some thousand, and this is laser number 0. And if you look closely at it, any laser sailor will recognize it. Not much different. It's one design and keep them the same, and we have the first one. As we kind of walk down our main aisle, we have on my right, this is a shipwreck design sloop built in 1912 in Massachusetts. More famous for us because in 1920 it was purchased by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who at the time was Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He wanted a boat to take his family sailing around the family compound in Campobello, Maine. So he found this boat in Massachusetts in the Marblehead area, and actually had a Navy destroyer go and pick it up in Massachusetts and take it to Campobello, Maine, where he spent the next few years sailing it with his family before he came down with the effects of polio. So there's some great pictures of him sailing with his family. So this is our little presidential yacht. A couple of Chriscrafts we have covered up right now, actually partially covered up. This is a 1957 sedan model Chriscraft. We recently had this out in our Streamline exhibit last summer, if anybody saw it. kind of a rare model Chriscraft designed to look like a car of the era. Another boat that was just on display last summer is our built-in West Mystic. This is a Hickman sea sled. Interesting design, kind of ties into Boston Whaler that we were talking about before with a cathedral hull and some other design. They used to race these from Boston to New York. An interesting steamboat. This is Nellie. She's a steam launch from 1872. You can kind of imagine her on the Mystic River. I like to imagine her on the Mystic River, but she was actually used on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. Was the first power-driven vessel on Lake Winnipesaukee. Now, the oldest boat in our collection is 1824. This is an Indian, Native American dugout oystering canoe. You can see it's very long, built from one carved out log, probably a pine tree brought down from the Adirondacks. It would have been used in the Norwalk, Connecticut area, Long Island Sound, for oystering. And as you can imagine, carved out of one log, it's not light. One interesting thing about this space is it's almost completely maintained and managed by a very great group of volunteers. And they are moving boats around and organizing and cleaning. And this was a pretty heavy one. So fortunately, the last time they moved it was the same day the crew of the Viking ship Draken was getting a tour through the Watercraft Hall. And they kind of came along, big Viking guys, and said, oh, you need help moving your boat? And they moved it here, and that's where it stays until we get our next Viking crew to help move it again. Another interesting fact for two vessels for racing sailors, we have two Starboats. Seti, this black hull here, she's star number 7, built in Long Island Sound, New Rochelle, Port Washington area, one of the original stars. And then we have a second star. This is number 221, and you can really see the development of the class, and still a very active racing class today. You might notice this area is a little brighter. We use this area for photogrammetry and measuring design. So we've got a hull here, a shipwreck fishing launch that our volunteers use photogrammetry and structured light modeling in order to get a 3D computer model of the vessel so that we can study the lines in the build as well as fully document the ship. So another interesting thing that our volunteers are doing. Here we have a Wino Senior. These were sailing class on Cape Cod area. One of my favorite things is, walking around the museum during the summer and having a visitor come up to me and ask me about a specific boat. So I, a few summers ago, had an older woman come up to me and say, ask, can you show me my dad's boat? I said, well, we've got a lot of boats here at Mystic Seaport, and you give me a little more information about it, but I'd love to help you find it. And she described the boat, and I knew that it was this Wino Senior, and I walked her over here with another group that I had, and she kept along the way saying, is this where my dad's boat is? Is this where my dad's boat is? And as we came down this passageway, she stopped and saw it. And she hadn't seen it since she was 12 and had sailed in it with her father. And she stopped and kind of broke into tears in seeing the boat. And the rest of the group kind of broke into tears just with the emotion of her, being reunited with her boat. And those are the kind of relationships and stories that we like to see with all of the boats in this room. It's really amazing to see when that comes together. So another interesting story behind a boat is up on the top shelf here is a bow with a blue cover on it, a white lifeboat. That is the lifeboat from the sail training vessel Albatross, which sank with the loss of 6 lives in 1961 in the Gulf of Mexico, which the story of it later became the movie White Squall. The vessel very rapidly heeled over and sank. The survivors were into 2 lifeboats where they were picked up later by a Dutch freighter and brought into Tampa. Another local connection to that is one of the survivors was Troy Johnstone, who is the brother of Rod Johnstone, who is the founder of J-Boats, and we actually have a J-24 up on the other side of the building. So lots of local connections and history. Again, not all wood. Here's a plastic craft, which we also had on exhibit this summer. We kind of duck in the back here. We have a little runabout here, Papoose, which is a neat story. This was built by, it's 1908, by one of the earliest and biggest radio manufacturers and patents and technology. And the builder, the engine in it, the radio company also built the points for the gasoline engine. So they got into all sorts of other kinds of business. We do have, actually back here, slide back, we have two of the whaleboats that were original to the Charles W. Morgan that came to the museum with the Morgan in 1941. So here is one of the whaleboats. If you visit the museum in the summer, you'll see whaleboats out rowing and demonstrations. Those are all mostly reproductions, but we do have two whaleboats that probably went whaling during the Morgan's career. So this is one of those. I have a launch. This is a yawl boat from the Murti B. Crowley, which was a 7-masted schooner. Not sure if you can see this, but this was a 7-masted schooner that was lost off of Martha's Vineyard, and the only thing that remains is this yawl boat, which is a pretty neat little craft. All right, we're going to keep walking down a little bit. In addition to Watercraft here, we also have sort of miscellaneous collection stores that don't necessarily fit in our collections vault or elsewhere. So we've got a whole collection of whale oil barrels, some equipment from the original mill building. The Rossi mill that we're standing in was originally used for velvet making. So we have some looms and things. Some whaling Triworks pots. Poked around the other day, there's some white plates up on a shelf up here. Not sure if you can quite see them. The top one there is the transom from the racing yacht Enterprise. Just, you never know what you're going to find poking around in here, including a couple of whale jaw bones up on the shelf here. You can get an idea of the size of these. And that is brings us to the end of our first room. That's just the first part of our collection, and I think we're going to show you the rest a little later.